Hey folks, before the video starts, please leave a like and subscribe to cheer me up. Make sure you are relaxed and enjoy today's stories. I bought a clown off the dark web. I didn't expect to find a present in my basement. Alright Reddit, I've been lurking here for years and never thought I'd be the one sharing a story. But after what happened, I feel like I have to. Maybe it's a way to process the trauma, or maybe it's a cry for help. Either way, here's my tale of how buying a clown off the dark web turned my life into a living nightmare. It all started a few months back. I've always been a bit of a thrill seeker, the kind of guy who enjoys exploring the darker corners of the internet. One night, while browsing some forums, I stumbled upon a discussion about purchasing weird stuff off the dark web. Among the usual drugs, fake IDs, and stolen data, one post caught my eye: custom clown services. Now, I'm not particularly afraid of clowns, but there's something inherently creepy about them. The idea of having a clown, a real-life clown, perform a private show seemed so absurd and bizarre that I couldn't resist the temptation. I contacted the seller, who went by the name Jingles, and after some back and forth, we agreed on a price. The deal was set: a clown performance in my basement in a week's time. The package arrived earlier than expected. It was a plain brown box, about the size of a suitcase. No markings, no return address. I opened it to find a clown costume, complete with oversized shoes, a rainbow wig, white face paint, and a note: put on the costume. The show starts at midnight. I was puzzled. I thought I'd be watching a performance, not participating in one. Still, curiosity got the better of me, and at 11:45 p.m., I started putting on the costume. The clothes fit me perfectly, almost as if they'd been tailored for me. I painted my face, put on the wig, and laced up the giant shoes. At midnight, I went down to the basement. The moment I stepped inside, the lights flickered and went out. I stood there in complete darkness, feeling like an idiot. Then I heard it. A soft chuckle, low and menacing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart raced as I strained my eyes, trying to see something, anything. Suddenly, the lights came back on, but they were dim and flickering. The basement had changed. The walls were covered in old, torn circus posters, and the air smelled of stale popcorn and rot. In the center of the room stood another clown, identical to the one I was wearing, except his face was smeared with something red. The clown didn't speak. Instead, he tilted his head and stared at me with unblinking eyes. I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. I tried to say something, but my voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The clown took a step closer, then another, until he was inches away from me. I could see every detail of his grotesque face: the smudged makeup, the cracked lips, the bloodshot eyes. Without warning, he grabbed my arm and dragged me to the corner of the room. There was a large, old-fashioned trunk there, the kind you'd expect to see in a magician's act. He opened it, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Inside was a collection of photos of me, taken without my knowledge. Some were from inside my house, others from places I frequent. The dates on the back showed they'd been taken over the past few months. How had I not noticed? The clown pulled out one photo in particular and held it up to my face. It was a picture of me sleeping in my bed. A shiver ran down my spine. He leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "We've been waiting for you." Before I could react, he shoved me into the trunk. I fell into darkness, hitting the bottom hard. The lid slammed shut above me, and I was engulfed in pitch black. I screamed and pounded on the sides, but it was like the air was sucked out of the box. My lungs burned, and I felt like I was going to pass out. Then just as suddenly, the lid flew open. I gasped for breath and scrambled out, finding myself back in my basement, the normal basement, with no clown in sight. The costume I was wearing was gone, replaced by my regular clothes. Had I imagined it all? I rushed upstairs, locked every door and window, and sat in the living room with a kitchen knife clutched in my hand. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak and shadow. Morning came, but the terror didn't fade. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I'd hear footsteps in the middle of the night. Items would be moved around, and I found more photos of myself, ones that hadn't been in the trunk. I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it, but deep down, I knew something was horribly wrong. Then one night, I heard it again, the low, menacing chuckle. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through. The power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I grabbed the knife and crept towards the basement, where the sound was coming from. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the lights flickered back on. Standing in the middle of the room was the clown, holding a large wrapped box with a big red bow. He grinned at me, and in a voice that sent chills down my spine, he said, "I brought you a present." I didn't want to take it, but I felt compelled. My hands shook as I unwrapped the box. Inside was something that made my heart stop, a severed hand clutching a note. I pulled the note free with trembling fingers and read it. "You can't escape the circus. The show must go on." That was 3 days ago. I haven't slept since. The clown appears every night, watching, waiting. I don't know what to do. I can't call the police. They'd never believe me. And every time I think about running, I find another photo of myself, taken that day, as if to remind me that there's no escape. I don't know how much longer I can take this. If anyone out there has any advice, please, I'm begging you, help me. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I have a feeling it's only going to get worse. Hey, Reddit, I'm back. Thanks to everyone who reached out after my first post. I've been trying to keep it together, but things have taken an even darker turn. Here's what happened next. The night after I found the severed hand, I decided to leave my house. I packed a bag and headed to a motel a few towns over. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, just in case the clown was somehow tracking my movements. For the first time in days, I managed to get a few hours of sleep. When I woke up, I had dozens of missed calls and texts from my family and friends, all asking where I was and if I was okay. Apparently, they'd been receiving strange messages from my number, messages I hadn't sent. The texts were filled with bizarre cryptic phrases and images of clowns. Some were pictures of me in the clown costume, taken during that night in the basement. I called my mom to reassure her, but the call was cut short by a knock on my motel door. My heart raced as I approached the door, knife in hand. I peered through the peephole and saw no one. When I opened the door, there was a small package on the ground, wrapped in the same brown paper as the first box. My blood ran cold. I brought the package inside, locked the door, and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a small, antique-looking music box. I wound it up, and it started playing a haunting, off-key version of Pop Goes the Weasel. As the music played, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, even though the windows were closed. The song finished, and the lid of the music box popped open, revealing a tiny clown figurine holding another note. I unfolded it and read, "You can run, but you can't hide. The circus is everywhere." I smashed the music box in a fit of panic and called the police, telling them everything. They arrived quickly, but of course, they didn't find anything suspicious. The officer I spoke to looked at me like I was crazy, especially when I showed him the photos. He suggested I see a therapist and left, probably thinking I was some kind of lunatic. Feeling helpless, I decided to go back home. As soon as I walked through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was deathly quiet, and a sense of dread hung in the air. I checked every room, but nothing seemed out of place. Exhausted and scared, I collapsed on the couch and drifted off to sleep. I woke up to the sound of that same chilling chuckle. My heart pounded as I looked around, but I couldn't see anything in the dark. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the room. That's when I saw it. A message scrawled on the living room wall in what looked like blood. "The show is far from over." I bolted upstairs to my bedroom and locked the door, barricading it with the furniture. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the corner, clutching the knife and trying to keep my eyes open. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to daylight streaming through the window. Hoping the daylight would bring some sense of normalcy, I ventured downstairs. The message on the wall was gone, but the unease remained. I decided to install cameras around the house, hoping to catch whoever or whatever was tormenting me. I spent the rest of the day setting them up, making sure every room was covered. That night, I watched the live feeds from my phone, determined to catch the clown in the act. For hours, nothing happened. I started to think maybe it was all in my head. But around 3 a.m., the camera in the basement picked up movement. I watched in horror as the clown emerged from the shadows, holding another box. He placed it in the center of the room and looked directly at the camera, his eyes boring into mine through the screen. Then, without warning, he vanished. I rushed downstairs, knife in hand, and found the box exactly where the clown had left it. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a videotape and another note. "Play me." I dug out an old VCR and hooked it up, inserting the tape with a sense of dread. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage of what looked like an old circus. The camera panned through a crowd of faceless spectators before focusing on the main attraction, a clown performing grotesque tricks. As the clown danced and juggled, the audience remained eerily silent, their faces void of any emotion. Then the camera zoomed in on the clown's face, which twisted into a sinister grin. "Welcome to the show," he said in a distorted voice. The screen went black, and a new scene started playing. This time, it was footage of me, taken from inside my house. I watched in horror as the clown appeared in each room, standing over my sleeping form, watching me eat, even standing behind me while I worked at my computer. The final scene was the most disturbing. It showed me in the basement, wearing the clown costume, laughing maniacally while holding the severed hand. I had no memory of this ever happening. The screen went black, and the words, "The show must go on," appeared in blood-red letters. I ripped the tape out and smashed it, but the damage was done. I felt like I was losing my mind. I didn't know what was real anymore. Was I being haunted by some supernatural entity, or was I going insane? Desperate for answers, I started researching the dark web seller, Jingles. I scoured forums and message boards, trying to find any information. After hours of digging, I found a thread about people who had similar experiences. They talked about buying clowns that haunted their lives, driving them to madness or worse. One post stood out. It was from a guy who claimed to have survived the ordeal. He said the only way to end the torment was to perform a ritual involving the clown costume and a personal sacrifice. He didn't go into details, but he left an email for contact. I reached out to him, explaining my situation. A few hours later, I got a reply. Meet me at the old carnival grounds at midnight. Come alone. Bring the costume. I didn't have many options left. I grabbed the clown costume, shoved it into a bag, and headed out. The old carnival grounds were abandoned years ago, now just a decaying reminder of better times. As I approached, a sense of dread washed over me, but I pressed on. I found the guy waiting near the entrance, a grim expression on his face. He introduced himself as Mark and explained the ritual. I had to put on the costume, go to the center of the carnival, and confront the clown. The sacrifice would reveal itself when the time came. With no other choice, I donned the costume once more. Mark wished me luck and stayed behind as I made my way to the center of the grounds. The place was a maze of rusted rides and tattered tents, but I eventually found the main stage. Standing there, waiting for me, was the clown. He smiled, and in that moment, I understood the sacrifice. It wasn't just about offering something valuable. It was about facing my deepest fears and confronting the darkness within. I stepped onto the stage, my heart pounding. The clown and I stared at each other, and I felt a surge of anger and fear. I pulled out the knife, ready to end this nightmare once and for all. The clown laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the empty carnival. "You can't kill me," he said. "I am a part of you." In a moment of clarity, I realized what he meant. The clown was a manifestation of my darkest thoughts, my fears, my regrets. To end this, I had to accept those parts of myself, not fight them. I dropped the knife and took a deep breath. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said, my voice steady. The clown's smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He let out a final, blood-curdling scream before disappearing into thin air. The air around me felt lighter, and I knew it was over. I returned to Mark, who congratulated me and explained that the clown would no longer haunt me. I could finally go home and start rebuilding my life. That was a week ago. The house feels different now, less oppressive. I still have nightmares, but they're fading. I'm sharing my story in the hopes that it helps someone else facing their own darkness. Remember, sometimes the only way out is through. Hey Reddit, I'm back again. I wish I could tell you that everything got better after the carnival, but it didn't. Things took a turn I never expected. If you've stuck with me this far, thank you. Here's what happened next. After my encounter with the clown at the old carnival grounds, I thought I'd be free. For a few days, it seemed like things were improving. The house was quiet, and I didn't find any more creepy photos or hear any unsettling noises. I even started sleeping through the night again. Then a few nights ago, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating. It was a notification from my security cameras. My heart skipped a beat as I opened the app. The feed showed a figure standing in my backyard, right under the old oak tree. It was too dark to see clearly, but the shape was unmistakable. It was the clown. My blood ran cold. I bolted out of bed, grabbed the knife I kept under my pillow, and rushed to the back door. But when I got there, the yard was empty. I checked the footage again, but the figure had vanished. Maybe it was a glitch, I told myself, trying to shake off the fear. The next morning, I found something disturbing on my porch. A small blood-stained teddy bear with a tag that read, "Welcome back to the show." I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe this was happening again. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Mark, the guy who helped me with the ritual. Mark was sympathetic, but didn't have much to offer. "Sometimes these things leave scars," he said. "You might need to do a cleansing ritual to get rid of any lingering energy." He gave me some instructions and wished me luck. That night, I prepared for the ritual. I gathered the items Mark listed: salt, sage, candles, and a mirror. I followed his steps to the letter, drawing a salt circle in the basement and lighting the candles around the room. I placed the mirror in the center and began to sage the area, reciting the cleansing chant Mark provided. As I completed the ritual, I looked into the mirror and froze. Behind my reflection stood the clown, grinning with malice. His eyes were dark pits, and his smile was twisted and unnatural. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, he was gone. I stumbled back, knocking over one of the candles. The flame flickered and went out, plunging the basement into darkness. I scrambled to relight it, my hands shaking. Once the room was illuminated again, I noticed something new. A trail of blood leading to the corner of the room. With a sinking feeling, I followed the trail. It led to an old, forgotten door I hadn't noticed before. It looked ancient, with rusty hinges and deep scratches marring the wood. I hesitated, every instinct telling me not to open it, but I had to know what was behind it. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room that smelled of decay. In the center was a chair, and on that chair sat another box. This one was different from the others, covered in intricate carvings and symbols I didn't recognize. I approached the box cautiously, my heart pounding in my ears. When I opened it, I found a videotape and another note. This time, the note was longer. "Welcome to the final act. You've proven yourself worthy of the ultimate performance. Play the tape. Embrace your destiny." I felt a chill run down my spine. What the hell did that mean? I took the tape upstairs and with trembling hands inserted it into the VCR. The screen flickered to life, showing the same grainy circus footage from before. But this time, there was something different. The clown wasn't alone. The camera panned to show a large tent filled with cages. Inside each cage was a person, people from my life, my friends, my family, my neighbors. They were all there, staring blankly at the camera, their faces pale and expressionless. The clown walked through the tent, pausing at each cage to taunt the captives. "The show must go on," he said repeatedly, his voice distorted and echoing. As he approached the last cage, the camera zoomed in to reveal a mirror. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't me. It was the clown. I screamed and turned off the TV, my mind racing. Was this some kind of sick joke? I had to find out if my loved ones were safe. I called my mom, my best friend, anyone I could think of. Each call went straight to voicemail. Panic set in. I drove to my parents' house, breaking every speed limit along the way. When I got there, the place was eerily quiet. I banged on the door, but there was no answer. I used my spare key to let myself in, my heart pounding with fear. The house was empty, no signs of a struggle, no indication of where they might be. I checked every room, shouting their names, but it was like they had vanished into thin air. The same thing happened at my best friend's house. Everywhere I went, I found empty houses and no clues. Feeling more alone than ever, I returned home. The house felt like a tomb, cold and silent. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, trying to make sense of everything. My thoughts were interrupted by a notification from my phone. The security cameras had picked up movement again. I opened the app and watched in horror as the clown reappeared, this time inside the house. He moved from room to room, his dark eyes scanning each one. He stopped in front of the basement door, looking directly at the camera, and smiled. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed the knife and headed downstairs. The door to the small room was open, and the box was gone. In its place was another note. Join us in the final act. The show is waiting. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to the old carnival grounds, face whatever was waiting for me there, and end this nightmare once and for all. I packed a bag with the essentials, flashlight, extra batteries, and the knife, and set out once more. The carnival grounds were even more sinister at night, the decaying rides casting long shadows in the moonlight. I made my way to the main stage, my heart hammering in my chest. As I approached, I saw a figure standing in the center of the stage, the clown, holding another box. This box was larger, wrapped in chains and padlocks. The clown didn't move, just watched me with those soulless eyes. I climbed onto the stage, every step feeling heavier than the last. I stood before the clown, who handed me the key to the padlocks. With shaking hands, I unlocked the chains and opened the box. Inside was a book bound in leather, its pages filled with strange symbols and drawings of clowns. The final page had a message scrawled in blood. To break the cycle, you must sacrifice your fear. Embrace the darkness within, and the light will follow. I didn't fully understand, but I knew I had no choice. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and opened myself to whatever came next. A wave of cold washed over me, and I felt the presence of the clown envelop me. Memories flooded my mind, moments of fear, regret, and pain. I saw my loved ones, their faces contorted in terror, and knew they were trapped in the same nightmare. But as I faced each fear, each dark memory, I felt a strange sense of peace. The clown's laughter echoed around me, but this time, it didn't scare me. It felt like a part of me, a twisted reflection of my own inner demons. As I accepted this, the laughter faded, and a warm light filled the stage. I opened my eyes to find myself alone. The clown was gone, and the carnival grounds were bathed in a gentle glow. The book in my hands had changed, the pages now blank. I knew it was over. I had broken the cycle. My loved ones were safe, and I could finally move on. I left the carnival grounds feeling lighter than I had in weeks. When I got home, I found my family and friends waiting for me, their memories of the past few days hazy, but their relief palpable. We hugged, cried, and laughed together, finally free from the nightmare that had haunted us. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm stronger now. I faced my darkest fears and came out to the other side. If you're dealing with something similar, remember this. Sometimes the only way out is through. Embrace your fears, and you just might find the light. Hey Reddit, it's me again. This will be my final update. If you've stuck with me through this ordeal, thank you. Here's how it all ended. After my confrontation at the carnival grounds and the strange ritual that seemingly broke the curse. I hoped life would return to normal. For a few days, it did. My family and friends were back, and the dark cloud that had hung over my life seemed to have lifted, but the peace didn't last. It started with nightmares, vivid, horrifying dreams, where I was back in the basement, wearing the clown costume, surrounded by faceless spectators. The laughter, that terrible, haunting laughter, echoed through my mind every night. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the sound still ringing in my ears. One night, I woke up to find myself standing in the basement, holding the knife. I had no memory of getting out of bed or going downstairs. Panic surged through me as I dropped the knife and backed away, my mind racing. What if the curse wasn't broken? What if the clown was still with me? Desperate for answers, I reached out to Mark again. We met at a diner, and I explained everything that had happened since the ritual. He listened quietly, his expression growing more serious with each detail. I think the clown is a manifestation of your deepest fears and regrets, he said finally. You faced them once, but maybe there's more you need to confront. The ritual was just the beginning. His words hit me hard. I thought I'd done everything right, but maybe I hadn't gone deep enough. Maybe there were still shadows I hadn't faced. That night, I decided to go back to the basement and confront whatever was haunting me once and for all. I armed myself with a knife and a flashlight, took a deep breath, and descended the stairs. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the wood sending chills down my spine. In the center of the room, where I had performed the first ritual, stood another box. This one was different, larger, with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding. When I opened it, I found another note. Face your final fear. The show ends tonight. Beneath the note was a mirror, just like the one from the cleansing ritual. As I lifted it out, the basement grew colder, and the shadows seemed to deepen. I placed the mirror on the ground and looked into it, expecting to see the clown. Instead, I saw myself, but not as I am now. I saw a twisted version of myself, eyes dark and hollow, face contorted with rage and fear. This was the part of me I had never wanted to face, the part that held all my anger, my regrets, my deepest insecurities. The reflection began to move on its own, stepping out of the mirror and into the room. It stood before me, a dark mirror image, and spoke in a voice that chilled me to the bone. You can't hide from me, it said. I am you. Every dark thought, every moment of weakness, every regret, I am all of it. I felt a surge of fear, but I knew I couldn't run. Not this time. I had to confront this dark part of myself, or I'd never be free. I know you are, I said, my voice shaking, and I accept you. The reflection laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. You think acceptance will save you? You think you can just embrace the darkness and it will go away? No, I replied, but I can understand it. I can learn from it. I won't let it control me anymore. The reflection's expression changed, a flicker of something almost like respect crossing its features. We'll see, it said. The show isn't over yet. With that, the reflection stepped back into the mirror, and the glass shattered, sending shards flying through the air. I shielded my face, feeling the cold sting of glass against my skin. When I lowered my arms, the basement was empty again, but I felt different, lighter somehow. The nightmares stopped after that night. The laughter faded from my mind, and the photos and strange messages ceased. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, For the first time in months, I felt free. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. Facing my darkest fears wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I've learned that the things we run from have a way of catching up to us, and the only way to truly be free is to confront them head on. To anyone reading this, if you're dealing with your own demons, don't be afraid to face them. It might be the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's the only way to find peace. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there. Remember, the show might go on, but you have the power to decide your role in it. Stay strong and don't let the darkness win. I bought a pill from the dark web. I woke up in another girl's body and I can't return. I've always been a curious person, but curiosity can lead you down some pretty dark paths. It was late one night and I was deep in the bowels of the dark web. Most of the time, I was just browsing out of boredom, but that night, I stumbled upon something that grabbed my attention. A post titled, "Body Swap Pill. Experience life in someone else's shoes." It sounded like a scam, of course, but my curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't help but click on the link. The seller's page was filled with testimonials from people claiming their lives had been changed by this mysterious pill. They described it as the ultimate escape, a way to start fresh in a new body. It sounded like the kind of thing you'd see in a science fiction movie, but I was intrigued. The seller, who went by the name of Dr. Morph, guaranteed the pill's effects and promised a full refund if it didn't work. There was a hefty price tag attached, but I had some savings that I'd been sitting on for a while. I justified the expense by telling myself it was just a way to satisfy my curiosity. Besides, the idea of escaping my mundane life for even a day was too tempting to resist. I clicked Buy Now, filled in the required information, and sent the payment. I expected some sort of delay, but to my surprise, the pill arrived within a week. It came in a small, unmarked package with a single white pill inside and a note that read, "Take this before you sleep. Your new life awaits." That night, I held the pill in my hand, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. What if it really worked? What if it didn't? I took a deep breath, swallowed the pill with a glass of water, and crawled into bed. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a huge mistake. I woke up the next morning feeling strange. My body felt different, like it didn't belong to me. I sat up and looked around, realizing I wasn't in my room. Panic set in as I scrambled to find a mirror. When I finally did, the reflection staring back at me wasn't my own. It was a girl, probably in her early 20s, with long dark hair and piercing blue eyes. I screamed, but the voice that came out wasn't mine. I touched my face, my hair, my body, trying to make sense of what was happening. I rushed to find some ID, anything that could tell me who I was now. I found a wallet on the bedside table. The driver's license inside belonged to a girl named Emma Thompson. My heart raced as I tried to piece together what had happened. The pill had worked, but it had worked too well. I was trapped in another girl's body, and I had no idea how to get back to my own. I spent the next few hours exploring the apartment, trying to find clues about Emma's life. It was a small, cluttered space filled with books, clothes, and photographs. I found her phone and hesitated for a moment before turning it on. It was locked with a passcode. I tried a few combinations, but had no luck. Desperation set in as I realized I was completely cut off from my old life. I didn't know anyone in this body, and no one knew I was really me. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the reality of my situation sank in. I decided to go outside, hoping the fresh air would help clear my head. As I stepped out of the apartment, I realized I had no idea where I was. The street looked unfamiliar, and the people around me were strangers. I felt a sense of dread as I walked aimlessly, trying to make sense of my new surroundings. I wandered for what felt like hours before I found a park and sat down on a bench. I watched people pass by, wondering if any of them could help me. I thought about going to the police, but what would I tell them? That I had taken a magic pill and ended up in someone else's body. They'd think I was crazy. As the sun began to set, I realized I needed to figure out a plan. I couldn't stay in this body forever. I had to find a way to contact Dr. Morph and reverse the effects of the pill. I headed back to the apartment, determined to find a way out of this nightmare. When I got back, I searched the apartment more thoroughly, hoping to find something that could help me. I found Emma's laptop, and to my relief, it wasn't password protected. I started searching through her emails and social media accounts, trying to find any information that could lead me to Dr. Morph. Hours passed, and I found nothing. Exhausted and frustrated, I collapsed onto the bed and closed my eyes. That's when I heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. My heart pounded as the door creaked open and a man walked in. He looked at me with a mix of confusion and anger. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I was paralyzed with fear. The man approached me, and I could see the rage in his eyes. He grabbed my arm and yanked me off the bed, demanding answers. "Where's Emma?" he shouted. I don't know," I stammered. "I woke up here this morning, and I don't know what's going on." He didn't believe me. He dragged me to the bathroom and shoved me in front of the mirror. "Look at yourself," he said. "You're Emma. Stop playing games." Tears streamed down my face as I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He locked me in the bathroom and left. I pounded on the door, begging him to let me out, but there was no response. I sat on the cold, tiled floor, feeling utterly helpless. I had no idea who this man was or what he wanted. All I knew was that I was trapped in a body that wasn't mine, with no way to get back to my own. As the hours passed, I started to hear strange noises coming from outside the bathroom. It sounded like whispers, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. My fear grew as the whispers turned into cries and screams. It felt like I was losing my mind. Finally, the door creaked open, and the man stood there, looking at me with a twisted smile. "Welcome to your new life," he said. "Get used to it." I was thrown back into the room, and he left, locking the door behind him. I was alone, terrified, and trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I had to find a way out of this body before it was too late. Days turned into a blur as I tried to come to grips with my new reality. I was Emma Thompson, or at least that's what the world saw. The man who had barged into the apartment turned out to be Emma's boyfriend, Jake. He was controlling and violent, and every interaction with him was a nightmare. He didn't believe a word I said about being someone else. He thought I was just trying to escape from him, which, ironically, wasn't far from the truth. Jake kept a tight leash on me, monitoring my every move. He went through Emma's phone, laptop, and any communication I tried to make. I was essentially a prisoner. trapped in a life I knew nothing about. The whispers I had heard that first night became a constant presence. They weren't just in my head. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd hear them coming from the walls, the floors, and even the air vents. Sleep became an escape, but even then, I was haunted by nightmares. I dreamt of dark, twisted corridors and shadowy figures that watched me with eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. Each time I woke up, drenched in sweat, I felt more and more detached from reality. Jake's behavior grew more erratic by the day. He had a dark side that I couldn't quite understand. One night, he forced me to sit down and watch home videos of Emma and him. At first, they seemed like ordinary couple moments, but as the videos went on, they became increasingly disturbing. There were clips of them arguing, with Jake's temper flaring up and Emma cowering in fear. There was a particularly chilling video where Jake seemed to be taunting Emma, who was bound to a chair, crying and begging for mercy. He was torturing her, enjoying her pain. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I realized I was now in the hands of a sadist. Desperate, I searched for anything that could help me escape. I went through Emma's belongings meticulously, hoping to find a clue, a hidden key, or a phone number I could call. One day, while Jake was out, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the closet. Inside, there were old diaries and a small locked box. I pried the box open with a hairpin and found a burner phone and a small vial of pills. The phone had a single contact, saved under the name L. I dialed the number with the trembling hands, and after a few rings, a woman's voice answered. "Emma, is that you?" "No, it's not, Emma. My name is Alex, and I'm trapped in Emma's body. Please, you have to help me." There was a pause, and then the voice responded. "Alex, listen carefully. This isn't the first time this has happened. Emma's been involved in some dangerous stuff. You need to find Dr. Morph. He's the only one who can reverse this. I'll send you the address." The line went dead, and moments later, a text came through with an address. My heart raced as I realized this could be my only chance. I had to get out of here and find Dr. Morph. That night, I pretended to be asleep until Jake finally went to bed. I waited until his snores filled the room before sneaking out of the apartment. The streets were dark and empty, and I felt a sense of foreboding as I made my way to the address from the text. It led me to an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place reeked of decay and neglect. I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The whispers were loud to hear, almost deafening. I followed them, feeling like they were guiding me. They led me to a room at the back of the warehouse. Inside, I found a man hunched over a table, working on something I couldn't see. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes were cold and calculating. You're not Emma," he said, more a statement than a question. "No, I'm Alex. I took a pill from the dark web, and now I'm stuck in her body. I need your help to get back to my own." He smiled, a sinister grin that sent chills down my spine. "Ah, the infamous Dr. Morph at your service. You want to go back, do you? It's not that simple." I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "Please, I'll do anything. Just help me." He stood up and walked around the table, revealing a collection of strange instruments and vials. "There is a way, but it's risky. You might not survive the process." "I don't care. I can't stay here. Please, just do it." Dr. Morph nodded and motioned for me to lie down on a makeshift bed in the corner of the room. He started preparing an injection, mixing various liquids in a vial. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, as he approached me with the syringe. "This might hurt," he said, and before I could react, he plunged the needle into my arm. Pain surged through my body, and I felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. My vision blurred, and the world around me began to spin. I could hear the whispers turning into screams, and I felt like I was being pulled into a dark abyss. The last thing I saw was Dr. Morph's cold, calculating eyes, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in my old room. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare, but then I saw the reflection in the mirror. It was Emma's face staring back at me. I was still trapped, and I realized with horror that the whispers were still there, louder than ever. The initial shock of waking up in Emma's body again was soul-crushing. Dr. Morph's attempt to reverse the effects had failed. Not only was I still trapped, but now I had this constant, haunting whisper that gnawed at my sanity. They were no longer just whispers, though. Sometimes I could make out words, phrases, even sentences. They spoke of pain, suffering, and a darkness that seemed to surround Emma's life. Jake's behavior took a turn for the worse. It was as if he could sense the change in me, even though he didn't understand it. He became more aggressive, more suspicious, and more violent. Every day with him was a new form of torture. The bruises on my arms and face became a grim testament to his rage. One night, after a particularly brutal encounter, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find a way out, even if it meant risking everything. I remembered the pills I had found in Emma's secret stash. There was a chance they could help me. Maybe they were connected to the original pill somehow. I waited until Jake had passed out drunk on the couch. I crept to the hidden compartment in the closet and retrieved the vial. There were 3 pills left. With no other option, I took one, hoping for some kind of change. Any change. I swallowed it dry, sitting on the floor in the dark, waiting for something to happen. The effects were almost immediate. My head began to spin, and the whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, screaming in my ears. I fell to the floor, clutching my head, as images began to flash before my eyes. I saw Emma's life, her pain, her suffering, Jake's abuse, her desperate attempts to escape, and finally, her reaching out to Dr. Morph for help. The images were so vivid, so real, that I felt like I was living them. And then I saw something new, something Emma hadn't seen. I saw her murder. Jake, in a fit of rage, strangled her while she begged for mercy. He watched as the life drained from her eyes, and then he hid her body in the very apartment I was now living in. My stomach turned as I realized I was living in the place where Emma had died, and Jake was a murderer, walking free. I woke up hours later, the sun streaming through the window. The voices had quieted, but the images remained burned into my mind. I knew what I had to do. I had to find Emma's body and bring Jake to justice. It was the only way I could hope to break free from this nightmare. That night, I waited until Jake left for one of his late-night outings. I began to search the apartment methodically, looking for any sign of where he could have hidden her body. The thought of finding her terrified me, but I knew it was the only way. After hours of searching, I found a loose floorboard in the bedroom. My heart pounded as I pried it open. The smell hit me first, a putrid, decaying stench that made me gag. I pulled back the floorboard to reveal a small makeshift grave. Emma's lifeless body lay there, wrapped in plastic. Tears streamed down my face as I looked at her, realizing the full horror of what had happened to her. I knew I had to call the police, but I also knew that Jake would come after me if he found out. I grabbed Emma's phone, the burner phone, and took pictures of everything. Then with shaking hands, I called 911. I reported the murder, giving them all the details I could. It didn't take long for the police to arrive. They stormed the apartment, arresting Jake as he returned home. The look of shock and betrayal on his face as they dragged him away was almost satisfying. Almost. The police took my statement, and I gave them the evidence I had gathered. They didn't question my story too much. Emma's body was all the proof they needed. They took me to a safe house, assuring me I was safe from Jake now. But I wasn't safe. Not really. The whispers were still there, growing louder by the day. They told me I had done the right thing, but they also told me something far more sinister. They told me I was still trapped, that Emma's soul was now free, but mine was still bound to this body. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to move on. I tried to live Emma's life as best I could, but it was impossible. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw her face, her eyes, staring back at me. I felt like I was losing myself, piece by piece. And then, one night, I received a call on the burner phone. It was the woman, the one who had given me Dr. Morph's address. "You did well, Alex," she said. "But it's not over. You need to come back. There's one more thing you need to do." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? What more do I need to do?" "Come back to the warehouse. There's something you need to see." The line went dead, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew I had to go back to find out the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. I stared at the burner phone in my hand, the woman's words echoing in my mind. The dread was overwhelming, but I knew I had no choice. I had to go back to the warehouse and find out what she meant. Maybe this would finally bring me the answers I needed, the closure I so desperately sought. I waited until dawn, hoping the daylight would offer some semblance of safety. The warehouse looked even more decrepit in the early morning light, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to dance in the corners of my vision. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping into the darkness once more. The whispers greeted me, louder than ever. They seemed almost eager, urging me forward. I followed them, navigating the maze-like corridors until I reached the room where I had first met Dr. Morph. He was there, sitting at his makeshift table, but this time he wasn't alone. The woman from the phone stood beside him, her face obscured by a hood. "Welcome back, Alex," Dr. Morph said, his voice dripping with a sinister calm. "We've been expecting you." I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is this? What do you want from me?" The woman pulled back her hood, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign. She looked like Emma, but her eyes were dark and hollow, void of any life. "We need to complete the process," she said, her voice a haunting echo of Emma's. "You've freed Emma's soul, but now we need to free yours." Dr. Morph gestured to the table, where a new vial and syringe lay waiting. "This final injection will sever the connection between your soul and Emma's body. It will be painful, but it's the only way." I felt a wave of fear wash over me. "And what happens to me?" The woman smiled, a cold, lifeless smile. "You'll be free, Alex. You'll be free to return to your own body, if it's still there, or move on to the next life." But first, you must endure the pain." I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The thought of returning to my own body was tempting, but the fear of the unknown was paralyzing. Yet I knew I couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a life that wasn't mine. "Fine," I said, my voice trembling. "Do it." Dr. Morph nodded and prepared the syringe. I lay down on the makeshift bed, bracing myself for the pain. As the needle pierced my skin, I felt a searing, burning sensation course through my veins. The whispers turned into screams, and my vision blurred as I was plunged into darkness once more. In the void, I saw flashes of my life, my real life. I saw my family, my friends, the mundane details of my everyday existence. I felt a longing, a desperate need to return. But then, I saw Emma's life too, her pain, her suffering, and her final moments of terror. I realized I was connected to her in a way I couldn't understand. The pain intensified, and I felt like I was being torn apart. My mind was splitting, fragments of my identity scattering into the abyss. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the pain stopped. I opened my eyes, expecting to see my old room, my old life. But instead, I was still in the warehouse, still in Emma's body. Dr. Morph and the woman were gone, the room eerily silent. I sat up, feeling a strange sense of emptiness. The whispers were gone, but so was a part of me. I was still Emma, still trapped, but the connection to my old life was severed. I was a shell, a husk, devoid of my former self. I stumbled out of the warehouse, the morning sun blinding me. The world seemed different, sharper, more real. I wandered the streets, aimless, lost. I had no idea what to do, where to go. My life as Alex was over, and Emma's life was a hollow echo. Weeks passed, and I drifted through the city, a ghost in someone else's skin. The police eventually found me, took me in, thinking I was just a lost, traumatized girl. They placed me in a shelter, offered me help, but they couldn't understand. They couldn't see the emptiness inside me. I never found out what happened to Dr. Morph or the woman. They vanished without a trace, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a shattered existence. Every day, I wake up, hoping to see my own face in the mirror, but it's always Emma, always her haunted eyes staring back at me. I've come to accept that this is my life now. I am Emma Thompson, but I'm also Alex, trapped in a never-ending nightmare. I live each day with the hope that maybe, just maybe, I'll find a way to truly escape. But until then, I'm just a stranger in my own body, a prisoner of fate.